So welcome everybody. I'm Gina Clays. I'm the facilitator and coordinator for Northeast Washington Forest Coalition, which is a forest collaborative that works with the Forest Service to advise on managing the Colville National Forest. And so forest collaboratives, they're a group of varied stakeholders, business interest, tribes, recreation, conservation, timber, and often legislators and officials, and they just consider all the different perspectives and help work with the U.S. Forest Service to help manage the national forest. And they're located all over the country, and they're associated with the local national forest. And so I wanted to take a moment to apologize about the website being down, but I'm glad that you were able to jump on. We're working the problem resolved. And so, so the topic of this pub talk is the updated strategic vision that the Washington Forest Coalition has been working on the past couple of years. So NEWFC, or the Northeast Washington Forest Coalition, they had a blueprint document that that was established about 15 years ago. And so this is updating that document, taking into account recent science and new management priorities and more diverse perspectives to get this updated document. And this project was supported in part with a grant from the Washington DNR, the Building Forest Partnerships Grant. So we wanted to thank that. And yeah, we'll have, so our presenters today are Tiana and Kurtis Vaagen. So Tiana is a NEWFC board member and the Colville Forest lead for Conservation Northwest, a nonprofit. She has past experience as a botanist, forester, and GIS specialist for a consulting company and beyond. And Kurtis Vaagen is the NEWFC board president. He's a third-generation sawmiller that was born and raised in Colville, Washington. He's vice president of operations for Vaagen Brothers Lumber and has experience working with a diverse group of stakeholders. And we can go ahead and get started with the presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Gina. Like she said, I am Tiana, and we're just going to start off with a brief introduction of who NEWFC is, who we are. So NEWFC was founded in 2002, almost 20 years ago now. And it was founded because we wanted to work collaboratively and find solutions for everybody. It came out of a product of the Timber Wars, and it's a group of many different entities, including the timber industry, environmental groups. We have recreation interests, foresters, technical advisors as well, and so on. And our mission is really to work collaboratively in Northeast Washington to steward and conserve forest ecosystems so plants, animals, and our communities can thrive. So back in 2002 and in the late 90s, our area and a lot of areas in the Pacific Northwest were going through what was known as the Timber Wars. And during that time, some of the timber practices on the land were not so good for the environment. And as a result, environmental groups sued and they became very successful. And unfortunately, as a result of that, the communities in this region and other areas suffered. And so conservation came together with Vaagen Brothers Lumber in this area to find a solution that works for everybody. NEWFC was founded on the principle that there is abundance for everybody in Northeast Washington, and that there is enough for everybody to get what they need. And also founded on the idea that, everybody is after the same goal. Everybody is looking to sustain the forest for the future. Kurtis, what do you want to add?
So far, so good. I mean, we're just kind of going through how it started. I think it was really mostly just kind of a partnership in the beginning of what the industry and the environmental groups kind of figured out that we had a common goal, and it was to protect a growing national forest and make sure that we were treating it properly and not I don't know, having more or less having more diverse stakeholders come to the table and just have these ideas out there. And it was, instead of focusing on the position of where we disagreed, you kind of went and you started on where you could agree and you worked from there. So that was the gist of why it started, because there was a lot of disagreements. And if you start from a position of the disagreement, then you really don't move the ball forward at all. And it turned out that we had a lot more in common than we anticipated.
Yeah, for sure. So what exactly does a forest collaborative do? Right, that's the question, right? So we work primarily with the Colville National Forest, other state agencies, tribes, other groups to promote ecological forest restoration, recreation, wildlands protection, which I'll get into later, and economic stability in all of Northeast Washington. We comment on projects with the Colville National Forest. We also try to work with them deeply to develop projects and come up with solutions that work for everybody. The idea behind collaboration is that if we can get together with these diverse entities and come up with agreements beforehand, these agreements that help we do the hard work of collaboration and agreement between the conservation groups and the timber industry beforehand, we can actually move a lot more quickly. And because of that, NEWFC has been seen as one of the most successful collaboratives in the United States after 20 years of success. Some of our projects in the past have included, promoting prescribed burning, thinning on the project, aquatic restoration, and these projects are done through the Forest Service. So our successes, once we get our website back up and running here, we do have a pretty good document that lays out all of our successes and documents on that website that we are happy to share with everybody. But we've collaborated on the planning and the budget and helped implement over 40 different projects on the Colville National Forest. In 2002, a record 122 million board feet were harvested. I'm sorry, in 2020, a record about 122 million board feet were harvested from the forest. And that is one of the most in the nation, certainly the most in the region. There was a slight typo on our press release that said it was the most in the nation, but I think it was like top 3 or something like that. On top of that, in 2018, we helped fund we received a $400,000 grant for aquatic restoration for a project called the Saweetan Project in Ponderay County to help fund aquatic restoration planning as part of that project, and that project is being implemented. We've also supported defending projects in court, such as the A to Z project. That means that when somebody sued on that project, NEWFC intervened and supported that project as a project that was collaboratively developed.
Yeah, just to add to that, Tiana, when actually in the court proceedings that was brought up from the judge was that the local collaborative was act as an intervener status within the project, along with some of the county commissioners and other entities. So that was a big part of what we consider successful.
And Kurtis, I'm going to throw you the tips to say, I believe prior to collaboration, there was only a certain percentage of lumber coming off of the Colville National Forest, and after collaboration, that has increased dramatically. Can you provide those numbers?
Absolutely. I don't have what it is for all the industry folks within our working circle, but I know our volume went from anywhere from 12 to 14% up to anywhere from 40 to 45%, depending on the year. So it's really given us the stability to be able to invest not only in our process, but in our people and our community. So with that amount of flexibility, we've actually increased wages almost 20% in the last 3 years.
And the timber volume that has come off the Colville National Forest, importantly to my organization, a lot of that volume is done as restoration. So the volume is a byproduct of the ecological forest restoration that creates resiliency on the landscape. We haven't always got it right? Collaboration is hard. This is an ongoing process. We've had, disagreements throughout the years. We still have disagreements among NEWFC members, between NEWFC and our outside collaborators. But we have made a lot of progress in the last 20 years. And I think that's the important message here, is that we are continuing forward. We are making progress. And while everything hasn't turned out perfectly, not all of the restoration that we see is not everything that we see is restoration, but a lot of it has been. And we have made progress in the methodology that has been used to harvest timber on the Colville National Forest.
So did you touch any on the wilderness and recreation?
Yes, that is next.
So I just want to point out that we did have recommended wilderness with the last plan that the Forest Service put out there. So it may not be exactly what what NEWFC and some of the community members were hoping for, but I mean, just to have recommended wilderness on the National Forest, that's a success in its own right. So we do applaud the Forest Service for listening to some of the people that have really been trying to push this for decades. So that's appreciated. It's not exactly what we're looking for. I'll let Tiana really drive that home, but it's something that we want to make sure to mention, that you don't have a lot of recommended wilderness from a forest plan. At least I'm not aware of it anywhere else.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that NEWFC has had such good cohesion among its members throughout the last 20 years is because we used to have something called the Thirds Agreement. It was NEWFC's blueprint. I'll cover it a little bit more in the next slide, but one of those thirds was support for wilderness. So in essence, we had support for wilderness, support for active management, and support for restoration on the forest, which gave all entities something to support and represented a compromise among the groups to support each other's efforts. The cornerstone of NEWFC's success has really been this support for permanent protection for wildlands in the Colville National Forest. And as Kurtis said, some of those lands that we support for wildlands for permanent protection were recommended to be wilderness in the 2019 Colville Forest Plan. That's not everything that NEWFC has supported from the beginning. And part of NEWFC's strategic vision that we're going to talk about more is modifying our support for that permanent protection of those wildlands to a more a measured approach that can help find solutions for everybody in the community, not just everybody within NEWFC, but everybody within the community. For recreation, NEWFC has also advocated for the backlog of retained receipts. Retained receipts are money that comes from timber sales. And so we've advocated to use some of that byproduct of forest restoration, those receipts and that money to help be used on recreation trails, including motorized and non-motorized trails. So NEWFC's blueprint. NEWFC's blueprint, like I mentioned previously, was our Thirds Agreement. It was a NEWFC's charter document that was started about 15 years ago, and it represented 3 zones of agreement. The first one was active management. So that means restoration in the front country that provides funding for the community, timber receipts, etc. Restoration zone was a zone that was closer to the back country, represented a less heavily roaded area where the focus was just to be restoration. And then also the wildland zone, which we talked about as those wilderness and other backcountry and motorized backcountry and wildlands as well. The blueprint also included a set of principles or agreements within those zones on how those zones would be managed. But after 15 years and changes in science, updates in landscape ecology, it was time to update the blueprint. And so about 2 years ago, we endeavored on the project to update NEWFC's agreements for management of the forest And I do want to be really clear about when I say management for the forest. The Colville National Forest does have its own land management plan. This strategic vision represents, our broader vision that represents the collaborative agreements among NEWFC members. It's our goal as a collaborative to help bring in the community, get community feedback, and to, help find ways to implement our vision on public lands in Northeast Washington. But to be clear, the Colville National Forest does have its own land management plan. So what is our new strategic vision? On to the meat of our talk today. It does three really important things. The first one is it combines that active management and restoration zone into one community ecological restoration zone or area. We did that because of new landscape ecology science that has come out that says we don't want to split these areas up just based on roads or just based on the geography. We want to manage our landscape based on subwatersheds from a landscape scale level without looking at these artificial lines in the forest and in the landscape to use for our management. That was really important that we did that. Number two, it updates the wild areas. So it incorporates, so the wildland areas, like I said, there were about 220,000 acres of wildlands that NEWFC supported on the Colville National Forest. We still support those to be permanently protected as wildlands, but the degree of permanent protection and what those protections might be has changed a little bit. We have some areas that we support as wilderness. We have some areas that we sort as other recreation or conservation designations. And then it also includes a tribal acknowledgement. The tribal acknowledgement within the strategic vision essentially just acknowledges that tribes have been on this landscape, in time immemorial for a long time, and that we are on these stolen lands in Northeast Washington. And we support these tribes in these areas, and we want to look for solutions for more concrete acknowledgement for tribes within the region in the future. And we acknowledge that within the plan. And then on top of that, I mentioned, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that tribal acknowledgement, just so to understand kind of where we're coming from and what we're trying to do there is with the fact that the tribal people have been on these lands for so long, especially the north half, is that a lot of the areas up there, we don't really understand a lot of the cultural elements that have historically been there for generations. So we're trying to push for more, whether it's names or signage up on the national forest, so that the information gets out to the public and all the user groups. We've seen with some areas that there was some public defacing of tribal areas in other national forests. And I think a lot of it came down to the fact that people didn't understand that that was a tribal site. So we're really trying to get more information to people so that if there is a historic site on the national forest, that people understand it, they see it, and they're a lot more likely to respect it. So it's just more of an information status as far as that's what kind of where we're starting right now. So.
Yeah, Kurtis mentioned a really important part about the north half. So in Ferry County, the Colville Confederated Tribe Reservation at one point included all of Ferry County, and then gold was found in Ferry County. And I believe in 1890 something, that was taken away from the tribes for a second time. And so in Ferry County, where a lot of the Kettle Range and a decent portion of the Colville National Forest resides now, those areas have a special status, being the north half of the Colville Confederated Tribes, and they do maintain fishing and hunting rights on those lands. And then lastly, our strategic vision also updates a lot of our principles, and those principles represent our pre-collaborated agreements for certain topics that I'll cover in a little bit on the Colville National Forest. They don't represent principles that are 100% set in stone. They represent agreements that exist at this time. And if there are proposals that go against those principles, then we have to go back to the drawing board and do a little bit more collaborating in the future amongst ourselves, so we can see if we can agree with, outside entities that propose such changes. And an important thing to note is that this is a dynamic document. We're fully intending to continue to collaborate amongst ourselves to further our understanding of many of the different principles, keep up to date on the most recent science, and then to work with other entities such as state agencies, the Colville National Forest, tribes, and others and the community to try and make our strategic vision better, including our principles, as well as, some of our other agreements. Okay, the Community Ecological Restoration Zone. This is the zone that covers most of forest management on the Colville National Forest. So that includes forest and watershed restoration to support ecological resilience. Our goal is to mimic natural disturbance processes. And the restoration tools include active management, prescribed burning, field reduction, managed wildfire, road management, aquatic restoration, and also to support communities through timber production as a byproduct. We were very intentional about calling it community ecological restoration. That doesn't mean, the science of community ecology. It means that this is the zone where we both support the community and we accomplish ecological restoration through creating resilience on the landscape. A lot of our principles apply predominantly to this zone. We have our dry forest restoration principles, we have our roads principles, we have wildland fire principles, prescribed burning. I think there are 19 different principles that we have as part of the strategic vision, and I'll list them off in another slide here. So it's pretty extensive. Anything to add, Kurtis?
I don't think so. Pretty easy to follow on that.
Yeah. And then our wildlands. Like I mentioned before, our wildlands support the current recommended wilderness in the Colville National Forest Land Management Plan. That includes Abercrombie Hooknose, Bald Snow, and Salmo Priest additions, but it also includes a measured approach for protection for other wildlands. That includes legislative designations for both the recommended wilderness as well as a subset of some of the other wildlands. And those legislative designations could be a number of different things. It could be a national conservation area, a monument, a wilderness. That hasn't been decided yet, right? Our goal with this is to prompt the conversation within the community to find a solution that works for everybody, to figure out, what is something where we make sure that we have solutions where nobody is left out. That's a hard lift. I'm not going to deny that. As any part of compromise, somebody's going to be disappointed one way or the other. But our hope is that we find the best solution that works for everybody in the community.
I think that's the biggest point you touched on there, Tiana, was that this was kind of a starter package that we lay this out there so that the conversations can begin. And we understand that they're not always easy conversations to have. And we'd like to invite more collaboration so that these conversations really do move us forward. And then we come up with a package that it really does set the most good for the most people on the ground. So that's kind of what we're excited about.
And I think we're also, with these legislative designations, we also want to acknowledge that there has been a measurable increase in recreation over the last several years. And it's crucial that we have this robust planning and that we have these tools to secure sustainable recreation for all user groups in the future. And I do mean all, meaning non-motorized, mechanized, and motorized within the community. Another point of, securing and permanently protecting a lot of these wildlands is we are, part of the other potential legislative designations include cultural designations that help amplify tribal cultural values. I mentioned on the recreation before, I guess I just said this, but jumped the gun a little bit there. But, we have had a major increase in recreation. Part of that is due to the pandemic, but that isn't going to go away. That is going to continue, and it will, increase. This area is being, whether everybody likes it or not, it is here to stay. And so NEWFC believes that if we take this approach to plan for the future, we can make sure that we don't end up as a community where locals get pushed out by incoming recreation, because we don't want that. We want to make sure that it's sustainable for our communities, and hopefully I'll also sustain those recreation uses for the future and provide some sort of economic viability for the community as well.
Just to add to that, obviously the increase has come in all sorts of different recreational activities, but from what we're hearing locally, at least here in Colville, that all the bike shops have no bikes, and they're anywhere from e-bikes to regular bikes to downhill bikes. The maintenance department in those bike shops are slammed busy. And what we're hearing is a lot of these folks are first-time users. So we're getting first-time users out on the forest that don't understand how to treat the national forest, and they don't know where they can and cannot ride. And I think we're really missing an opportunity to have these users really understand what the national forest provides, not only for recreation, but for other species and timber as well. I mean, the side-by-side technology has came so far, and a lot of these users just do not understand a multi-use forest, because those machines have increased not only in popularity, but capability so much that we're really missing an opportunity to give them information. And that's what we hope to get to, I think, in the future with a lot of this, is getting the right information to the right people so that we can all kind of play nice together.
And once again, the tribal acknowledgement, which we have touched on quite a bit now, but we support elevating tribal voices through education, recognition of tribal ancestral lands, and potential cultural designation. So like we mentioned before, that's signage, that's name changes for areas, or name changes for newly created areas on the forest, and just the acknowledgement that we were not the first people here. Okay, our principles, I guess there's 16, not 19, ended up cutting them down a little bit, but we have aesthetic principles, commercial harvest within inventoried roadless areas, dry forest management, large tree, inventoried roadless areas, wilderness. There's a ton, and I'm not going to just read them all off because that's boring. But like I mentioned, our principles are dynamic. They represent our agreements currently. One that's been a little bit controversial is the large tree principles. I'll call that one out because right now the support that we can agree on among our members right now is reverting back to the old agreement from the East Side Screen, which has now gone away under the new Colville Land Management Plan. Under East Side Screens, the requirement was that all trees under 21-inch DBH for smaller, all trees larger than 21-inch DBH or larger were kept on the forest and were not cut. And because we don't have agreement among all of our members, right now that's what our principle says. That doesn't mean that NEWFC has a hard stance against cutting all trees above 21 inches. That means that when the Colville National Forest proposes that there are trees cut larger than 21 inches, that we have to go back to the drawing board and do more collaboration and do more research and connect with experts to try and find a solution that works for everyone. As an example that this is a dynamic and living document, we have a field trip scheduled for next week with some area researchers and experts from the National Forest Research Station, from DNR, and a few other people to come out and talk to us about large trees and large tree restoration. and old growth restoration on the Colville National Forest to try and find a solution that works for everybody. So we're not there yet. Collaboration is ongoing, and hopefully that's a good example of the process by which we use these principles.
Absolutely. That's exactly what, excuse me, what we're doing right now is you have those areas of contention or more information. And it's so easy to say, let's just skip over this, but we have those hard conversations where we do go out with the professionals. So just because it's, we have these either blueprint or strategic vision, it doesn't mean that we can't look at the science and in certain areas do something where we collaborate and either change the description, change that strategic vision, or do it on a project by project basis. We've seen instances where the 21-inch rule makes sense to keep, and then other areas where it doesn't. The National Forest is so diverse that it's not a easy thing to just print out some ideas on a piece of paper and blanket the entire National Forest, because you have the highlands up in the Kettle Crest that are so much different from the Pondere Valley. So we just really like to have that collaborative, basically a collaborative summit where we come together and we discuss these opportunities as often as possible.
Yeah, on top of these 16 different principles, we also have our zones of contention. So we've highlighted a certain number of areas that represent areas that we don't have agreement on, and that we're continuing to work to try and find principles for. We also have a couple other principles that we're intending to integrate into the strategic vision into the future, including mixed conifer forest restoration and aquatic restoration. And I realize this map might be a little bit difficult for everybody to see. That lighter green community ecological restoration area color, oh my gosh, sorry, represents pretty much all of the Colville National Forest. Anything that is not an area that is backcountry, either non-motorized or motorized, or an inventoried roadless area, is included within that community ecological restoration zone. That lighter brown color are the areas that right now represents our potential legislated areas, the ones that we want to have a conversation about with the community. We've had that conversation within NEWFC, but we want to expand that now to talk about it in a little bit more detail. And then the darker brown colors are the other roadless areas, which are important areas that, do need to stay as backcountry, whether that's backcountry motorized or non-motorized or some other sort of roadless area. But they're not areas that we wanted to elevate as highly to potential legislated areas. This is also included as part of NEWFC's executive summary for the strategic vision, which usually is available on our website. And we're hoping that's back up today or tomorrow. But if you want to look at it in more detail, and if you do want a copy of it and you don't have it already, feel free to email us at newfcinfo@gmail.com, and we have that email listed at the end of this presentation. Anything to add, Kurtis?
Yeah, I think you hit it pretty good as far as the fact that this isn't set in stone. This is a draft. And that's where we're hoping to get that conversation started. We know that there are some areas right next to the Colville Indian Reservation that there's discussions that need to be had with the tribe, and we're really excited and welcoming those conversations as well. And I know that that's going to be something that happens in the near future. So just get this map out there and then see what everybody else thinks. And I'm going to poke some holes in certain areas, and that's kind of where we collaborate and come up with a better plan.
Yeah, well said. So what's next? Part of it is that we're gonna, whoops, I left a sentence off there. But anyway, we're gonna continue to build on landscape restoration, right? We're gonna continue to do that work of working on projects, of working through those principles and trying to apply those principles on the Colville National Forest and in Northeast Washington as a whole, when we consider an all lands approach. But as part of that, we're also going to have a focused intention to implement those conservation, recreation, and tribal components through legislation in those potential legislated areas. And we've been calling that effort New Heritage, so Northeast Washington Heritage. Northeast Washington Heritage has grown out of NEWFC. It's not a NEWFC entity. It's something that has been, happened because of the 20 years that NEWFC has worked on looking to try and have these areas of legislation to permanently protect these wildlands. But it's not a NEWFC driven initiative. New Heritage is not a plan itself. It's an initiative. It's an opportunity for community members to come together to discuss what works for everybody.
Yeah, with what I have understood with the New Heritage model is it's a lot of listening to the tribal aspect of why things are the way they are and where they came from. That's where the heritage portion comes from, in that that they're giving us information and we're kind of giving the ideas, and it is kind of a collaborative model as well. So to get the ideas from the tribes that have been on these national forests for multiple generations is so important. And I feel like this is the next step in how we get local fingerprints on what the plans will be for the next multi-generation. And that's where some of these permanent protections come from, is how do you get that local ideology within a national plan? It's very hard, and that's what I think collaboration does, is it gives you a diverse idea of what can and cannot happen. And I'm just excited to be a part of it. I've learned a lot over the last year and a half, and continue to learn every single meeting that we have. I'm so just definitely excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, same for sure. Okay, that's what we have for you. Like I said, our website is down, but it should be up hopefully by tomorrow. If you have any direct questions right now, please reach out to Gina or myself or Kurtis. But now we have an extra 20 minutes or so that we can open this up for questions.
If you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself, whichever you feel more comfortable with.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, my name is John. I am mostly in mountain biking up in Kettle Crest a lot, and live in have a place up by Barstow where I spend a bunch of time. And one thing that's been really intriguing to me, and you've touched on, is this a lot of this indigenous naming stuff. And I'm curious, is there any sort of known map or other documentation that shows these the naming for those indigenous names of the areas or the features or the regions or things like that? Or is that in progress, or what's that look like?
So the short answer to that is no, that doesn't exist. There is an old cultural document that was produced by the Colville National Forest that has some of those names. But part of that struggle is that, the Colville Confederated Tribe represents 12 different tribes, and some of their ancestral lands overlap. So there's different names for different areas from different tribes. First of all, there's also the Kalispel tribe on the other side of the forest, and they have their different names too. So that's been a challenge. The Kalispel tribe, along with a tribe in northern Idaho and Montana, have worked together to put together a map book that includes a lot of the ancestral names within their area, but it only covers, a small portion of the Colville National Forest. And as far as I know, that book is only in hard copy form, and it took, something like 15 years to put together. It's a gorgeous book, and it's great that it exists, but that doesn't exist for any of the Colville Confederated tribes right now.
I'd say that's an excellent question, John. And honestly, I'd love to see a map. I think, and I could be mistaken, but from what I understand and what I've seen with maps from the tribes is mostly bodies of water. They mapped out very well because they use them extensively for travel, transport of goods, and obviously fishing. So I've seen some of those maps and they're amazing. But anything that I've seen on the forest, they're a lot smaller. They don't take in the entirety of the forest that I've seen. I know that some of those exist, and we've been speaking with certain members that have a lot of history, some of the tribal elders. So we get bits and pieces, but we do not have an entire map of what like the north half. It's a huge area, and I don't know if it exists. I'd love, if somebody ever finds one, I'd love to see it.
What to add off of that, I think you mentioned it a little bit, Kurtis, is that there are meetings being held and that are planned right now that are going to be discussing, local names, indigenous names for this area.
Cool. Thanks.
So this is Eric Mankinson, sustainability consultant for the Kalispel tribe. And I'd just like to throw out an invite to everybody on this call in 2 weeks. So that is November 17th, that's a Wednesday. We will be demoing some biochar kilns on the reservation at a recent harvest with some small slash piles. We'll be trying out both the Oregon kiln and the polygon of fire. And we invite anybody else that's interested in carbon sequestration and utilizing biochar to really restore that carbon mass in the forest soil to join us. And I'll put my contact information here in the text box, and I invite everybody that is interested to reach out to me, and I'll send directions on how to find our slash piles.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Yep.
And that reclaimed wood as your backdrop, it looks great.
Boy, thank you.
This is Emery from RVCC, and I was curious if you all could speak a little bit more to the New Heritage organization in terms of like the conversations that led to its creation and kind of it as a spinoff of the collaborative's work, and kind of what you see as the ongoing relationship between the two.
Well, Tiana would be, I would say, better at answering how it happened and why, but I think in the beginning, from what I understood, is it was just, we didn't have a lot of tribal involvement and how we could get to that point. So we just started kind of setting up meetings with some of the local tribal members and listening to what some of their ideas were and some of their culture. But that's kind of we started just meeting more regularly, and it kind of seemed like, okay, we're meeting regularly enough, and we're coming up with all these ideas. So this needs to be kind of a group that we do it regularly enough and come up with solutions rather than just having meetings and talking to each other. I mean, it was great. And I don't know the exact how it formed, but that was, I believe, why we started. It was just to get more tribal involvement with NEWFC. And it turned out that it had its own direction that we wanted to follow.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a major component of it. It's also that, NEWFC primarily, along with the wilderness portion, has focused a lot on restoration, on forest restoration. And to NEWFC, like, this is a much bigger, broader community discussion that needs to happen. And a lot of the discussions that happen within NEWFC, haven't really, been of interest to a lot of different community members. We want to make sure that the idea of having a new entity is to make sure that these discussions can be held without any, solid agreements among those members so that everybody feels welcome to come is part of it. I know we've heard from other community members that they're not interested in being involved with NEWFC for a number of different reasons. And so because of that, we want to have it decided that this needs to be a different entity. This needs to be an opportunity for all voices within the community to be heard equally. And while we've tried to do that within NEWFC, I think there's been a few barriers to that.
Thanks. That's really helpful. And just one quick follow-up. I was in the training with both of you, the S&W training, and just curious if it was also related to some of the, I don't know, kind of challenges or problematic nature of tribes being involved in that collaborative process.
Yeah, that's definitely been a part of it as well. Yeah, that tribes are sovereign entities, and so being involved with collaboration, a formal collaboration, can take away their voice as a separate government. So that's part of it.
And I would also say that tribes like to steer the ship. I don't think that having us as a front runner in a group that focuses on what tribes want would be
Okay, I'm taking my webinar to go pick it up the kids, and I'll be back on it.
We're losing you, Kurtis. Is everybody else still there? Looks like it's.
Yeah, I think we're all still here. Is it just Kurtis that's having trouble? Yeah.
Send him a text, hopefully. Maybe he can turn off his video.
Should I mute him? Oh, there he is. In the meantime, sorry, Kurtis, if I'm interrupting you, but we can't hear you. So there's a question in the chat about why NEWFC is supporting roading and logging in a roadless area adjacent to or an unroaded section adjacent to the Hungry Mountain roadless area on the IPNF. It's an important grizzly bear habitat.
So we've never formally provided our support for the Sweeten project. And that's for a number of different reasons. One of those reasons is that the project is using condition-based analysis for that project, which means we don't have a lot of the detailed information that NEWFC normally uses in order to see whether it meets our principles and whether it meets agreements among NEWFC members. That means because of that process, we can't actually provide any support for that project because the details of where exactly logging is going to occur on that project, such as within those, adjacent to those roadless areas and important wildlife habitat, we don't actually have. So we've been hesitant to provide provide any sort of support for that project right now. We do support the aquatic restoration as part of the Sweeten project. We have not, filed any sort of objection. We have not formally said we don't support the project either. We're just waiting for more information and to be involved in implementation to make sure that things like, logging in old growth or logging in important grizzly bear habitat does not happen as part of that project.
All right, thanks for that response, Tiana. Looks like Kurtis might be back. Sorry that you got interrupted there, but go ahead. You're frozen. You might want to turn off your video, Kurtis. All right, well, that might take a while. Anyone else have any questions? It's 12:50, so we still have some time if anyone else has any questions.
Well, if there's no other questions, I have another one. I don't want to hog it all up with.
Oh,
biking
sure,
stuff.
go ahead.
Okay. I was just curious, there's, with the forest fire stuff, how do, if at all, how much is this group involved with, I guess the sort of the cleanup and the restoration, if any, when it crosses over recreation areas? So I'm thinking specifically of the Bulldog Fire that crushed about 4 miles of the lower Taylor Ridge Trail. Is how involved, if at all, is this organization in that sort of restoration effort?
So that's something that we can advocate for, through the use of retained receipts. We have our recreation liaison that definitely works to help make sure those things happen for recreation and for restoration. I guess that's the only details that I have, is that, there are certain things that we support. We want to make sure that, restoration happens after fires, whether that's ecological forest restoration or recreation. And of course, that's limited by funds, but we can use our voice and our group to advocate to make sure that those things happen for the community. So if you see things like that on the forest that you identify a need for, feel free to reach out to NEWFC and bring it to our attention, because we can definitely work together to make sure that it happens.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep.
And that applies to anything, right? If there's other needs that individuals here see a need for, feel free to bring it to our attention and we can, work together.
Yeah, there's also a comment period usually for different project areas. So for the Bulldog project that's occurring in the Bulldog Mountain area, there was recently a comment period that ended, and NEWFC submitted a comment letter for that addressed concerns about restoration after wildfire. So anyone can submit comment letters also.
And that's something that, so is our formal process with NEWFC, or is that just a kind of a generic statement that we go and do with the Forest Service or with that organization?
Yeah, that was with the Forest Service.
Okay, yeah, okay. I'm kind of plugged into those too. Okay.
Great.
Yep, thanks.
Kurtis, can you hear us? Did you want to chime in?
I can hear you guys. Definitely having some issues. Yeah, I think Tiana answered that very appropriately. Really, is any information that you get or if you see that on the ground, because I mean that's kind of what collaboration is all about. If you see something that we could advocate for, and that's where those retained receipts can be utilized. So I mean, everybody can't be on every trail or every road. So if there's an issue that we can bring to the light, it's very important. So I've used in the past, not so much within a NEWFC role, but to use a GoPro driving roads after fires and look for timber volume and road and culvert issues that we were going to have that was going to upset the system roads. So utilize the tools that we have and get the information to the Forest Service and to entities like NEWFC that can kind of try and
Well, it looks like NEWFC needs to start advocating for a better rural internet too, so we can get our work done.
Excuse me, this is Gloria. I just wanted to jump back to the question regarding some restoration work post-disturbance. And I'm sorry if I wasn't able to join earlier, and you may have discussed this, but NEWFC, along with our fellow collaborators over in North Central Washington, developed a fairly extensive set of guidelines for post-disturbance work on national forest lands. And so there is a considerable body of work that's already been done on advising the national forest managers on what we collaboratively feel is appropriate in post-disturbance work and where we want to collaborate further. And that is part of the strategic vision incorporated.
And Gloria Flora is a board member of the Northeast Washington Forest Coalition. I don't remember if you said that, Gloria. So.
No, I didn't say that. Thank you. I should have done that.
Thank you for chiming in.
All right, well, we're getting close to 1. Any last questions before I wrap things up here? All right. Well, if anyone ends up having any questions that you think of, feel free to email at newficinfo@gmail.com. And hopefully our website will be up again soon. And there's a contact form on there if you'd like to be added to our newsletter. We send out quarterly newsletters, and just, sometimes we have special events that we email about and things like that, special news. And so feel free to add yourself to that. And this recording will be on our website also. And stay tuned for further pub talks. Hopefully we'll be back in person again someday. But for now, they're just virtual, probably in January. And if you have any suggestions of topics that you would like covered, please feel free to reach out. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Hope to see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.